All right, let's give you then a sense of just those numbers in terms of the price increases on Brent crude. So over the past 2 days, Brent crude prices skyrocketed, as we've been saying, to over $100 per barrel, reaching the levels it last reached in June 2022. So as you can see there, just some of those numbers on your screen. So for much of February, the market was, relatively stable, with prices hovering in the $69 to $70 per barrel range. Now, the Middle East crisis has for a long time been considered a geopolitical risk that was likely causing the subdued oil prices that we are seeing, prices to skyrocket. Now, the oil price had increased by 50% exactly a month ago. As we go deeper in those numbers, on the 9th of February, sitting at $69 in 2026 to $104 in February 2026. That is a $35 increase. Now, for many South Africans, this does matter because, the country imports most of its oil. We've heard from a number of experts. When global crude prices essentially rise this quickly, it usually feeds through into, higher petrol and diesel prices, which then affects transport costs, food prices, and overall inflation, as we've been hearing. In other words, what we're seeing in this chart is not just, volatility in global energy markets. It's something that could soon be felt at the fuel pump here at home. And that's why we have got a number of economists that we are speaking to. So for the economy like South Africa, heavily reliant on imported oil movements like this, really stay confined to global markets, they tend to show up fairly quickly at the fuel pump in transport costs and ultimately in inflation. So let's bring in our guests. We have, invited two economists to unpack just what's driving the surge and what it could mean for South Africa's economy. We have Owen Khumalo, Director and Chief Executive Officer of Weaver Investments, as well as Xhanti Payi, Senior Economist at PwC. Gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. Xhanti, perhaps let's start with you. I mean, are we witnessing a temporary geopolitical shock or the beginning of another cycle of sustained high energy prices, although I think the former may be at play here? Let's start with perhaps the roughly 50% increase in a short space of time from, oil prices rising, as we saw there in that graph, around $69 per barrel a month ago rather, to now sitting at over $100 per barrel. How significant a move of this magnitude in such a short time is it?
Hi there. First of all, just to say that I'm no longer with PwC, I'm with Inani Strategies. But thank you very much for having me. I think one of the key things, as you asked, is that we have been following this, and it's been one of the key risks that many people would have been looking at, the geopolitical situation in the Middle East and the Gulf. And it's something that has been of concern for quite a while. And it's something you would have seen in the risk matrices, for example, of the Reserve Bank, where this is one area of serious concern that had been actually for the past perhaps 2 to 3 years, as we've also looked at that in terms of even the conflict that we've seen between Russia and that part of the world. So certainly this has been something that has been a real concern. It's been a real risk. And it is now actually something, therefore, that has materialized, the risk that has materialized. And we are seeing that in the prices that we are looking at.
Apologies for that, Xhanti. Thank you so much for correcting us. We'll definitely reflect on that. Owen, perhaps let's, add you on the conversation. I mean, the Middle East has long been considered the biggest geopolitical risk to global oil markets specifically. How much of this current surge, is being driven by these real supply fears, versus the market speculation? I mean, we've seen how major oil producers have implemented supply cuts already. To what extent are these decisions just amplifying the current spike in price?
Oh, the fears are real, Unati, and they're justified. As you say, the Middle East has been a hotbed of geopolitical instability for a while, but the market did not react as much as we've seen now in the past, because when you have a conflict between Israel and the likes of Lebanon, or the Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthis in Yemen, it's different to when you've got the OPEC countries, the biggest oil producing countries now being involved in the conflict. And as you know, a lot of the oil that gets supplied to global markets, at least about 20% of global supply of oil products, moves through the Strait of Hormuz from those OPEC countries and the big producers, the likes of Iran, who is now directly involved, Iraq, Bahrain, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. And as we speak now, that Strait of Hormuz is under the control of the Iranians, and there are no ships moving. Over the weekend, we saw reports that a couple of ships tried to ignore the warnings and tried to pass through, and they were shot. And they went up in flames. So the problem now is it's created a bottleneck. Those oil-producing countries cannot move their oil. They're running out of storage space, and they're having to cut production. And so it grinds the world economy slowly towards a shutdown. Well, not immediately, but certainly that's why we're seeing the oil prices spike as they are. And I think also the conflict or the war rather, is at a dangerous stage now, where in the past week or so, they were targeting military infrastructure. Now it has moved to attacking energy infrastructure. We saw that in Qatar, probably the world's second biggest producer of liquefied natural gas, shutting their biggest facility there. So Europe is affected. They're having to look elsewhere, even closer to home. They're looking at supply from Mozambique. And you've got oil refineries being shut down in Kuwait and in Qatar, and hence the crisis that we have. So yes, the fears are justified and the fears are real. Whether that prolongs or it's a short-term shock to the economy and the markets, a lot will depend on how long this conflict lasts.
That is quite concerning. Xhanti, given that South Africa is a major importer of crude oil, what does oil trading above $100 per barrel potentially mean for local fuel prices in the months ahead? I mean, we're already seeing reports to brace ourselves for a potential fuel price shock in the beginning of April.
Yes, it's a huge concern, as you say. That not only that, also our ability to have, the stocks that we have. There are certainly some of the challenges that we have, is that also our refining capacity. So whatever stocks we have, to be able to refine that into fuel is also an issue. So this is something of serious concern to South Africans because of the fact that we don't produce any. We hardly have any refining capacity, and that would have been, I guess, caught really in a really vulnerable space at the moment. So we've already seen an indication of higher prices for fuel.
All right, so apologies for that. I think we might have lost Xhanti. Owen, do you want to pick up perhaps where he left off?
Yeah, let me pick up where Xhanti left off. And I think because it's such a fast-moving crisis and the projections change almost from day to day. Last week, we were looking at different projections as of this morning. As of this morning, expectations are that in early April, when energy prices or fuel prices are revised, we're looking at a likely increase on the cost of fuel, of petrol of around 2.40 Rand, and diesel expected to go up by around 4.50 Rand. But as I say, this is dependent on how this war progresses. There's quite a bit of time to go in March. So the next 3 weeks will be critical in terms of the direction of the conflict, because those estimated increases in fuels could be revised significantly upwards. So yeah, it's quite concerning. There are some moves to try and alleviate the price of fuels at the pump. The G7 finance ministers are meeting today as we speak to try and coordinate a release of strategic oil reserves to try and calm the prices on the markets. But yeah, the bottom line is that expect fuel prices to go up at the pump in early April. For South Africa, it's a double whammy, because as we saw in the budget from the finance minister last month, we're expecting an increase in the fuel price. of 21 cents, made up of the general fuel levy, the carbon levy, as well as the road accident fund levy. This is over and above the increase we're expecting from emanating from the conflict in the Middle East.
Yeah. And I mean, just before our interview, we also, just read a package from, concerns around agricultural business chamber of South Africa, saying that South Africa imports roughly 80% of fertilizer and its prices typically follow the oil price trend. So concerns there. Any other industries in the country that would be watching this very closely with some level of concern?
Yeah, certainly the plastic manufacturing industry and packaging industry would be watching what's happening with the oil prices with a lot of interest, because a lot of the products that go into plastic manufacturing and packaging products, those are byproducts of oil production. So yes, it's quite concerning. Our manufacturing base could be hit quite significantly. The cost of importing some of the materials and the cost of moving goods will certainly be impacted as fuel prices go up. But yeah, the actual raw materials they use in the manufacturing are going to be affected as well, besides just the fertilizer products.
Absolutely. Owen, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. Of course, Owen Khumalo is the Director and Chief Executive Officer of Weaver Investments. And of course, earlier on, we had Xhanti Payi, who's also an economist at Inani Strategies. Thank you so much to you both.